When people think of warmth in wartime, they imagine sleeping bags, wool blankets, or heavy coats. During the First World War, however, issued sleeping bags were rare, bulky, and often ineffective in the wet, freezing reality of trenches and forward camps. Soldiers on every front quickly learned that wrapping the body alone was not enough. Heat was not being lost only to the air. It was being drained into the ground, wicked away by moisture and stolen by stillness. What emerged from this harsh education was a field method that consistently held more heat than any early sleeping bag. It was not a single item, but a system that combined insulation, airflow control, and shared thermal mass in a way modern gear often overlooks. Ground heat loss was identified as the true enemy long before hypothermia was understood. During the First World War, soldiers learned through hard experience that the cold seemed to seep up from below. Mud, frozen soil and damp boards acted almost like heat sinks, pulling warmth away from their bodies. Lying directly on the ground, well, it drained body warmth faster than cold air ever could. In response, troops began to build layered ground insulation, using whatever materials they could find. Straw, hay, pine boughs, spare uniforms, sandbags filled with dry material, and even crumpled paper were all laid beneath the body to help keep the cold at bay. This was not random comfort-seeking. Dry organic material traps air, and, well, air is the real insulator. A soldier elevated just a few inches off frozen ground retained significantly more heat through the night. Modern application of this principle is, straightforward. In any cold environment, insulating beneath the body matters more than thick layers on top. A simple raised bed of dry plant matter or even layered fabric can actually outperform many modern sleeping systems as long as ground contact is properly managed. The greatcoat wrap? Well, it created a sealed heat envelope instead of just a loose covering. Rather than sleeping inside a bag, soldiers used their issued wool greatcoats as structured wraps. The coat was laid open, the body placed diagonally, and the lower end folded over the feet before the sides were wrapped tightly around the torso. This created a tapered enclosure that reduced dead air space and limited convection. Insulation works best when it fits closely without compression. Wrapping systems that eliminate excess internal air often outperform bulky bags in cold, wet conditions. Shared warmth was deliberately used as a thermal strategy. In forward positions, soldiers frequently slept in pairs or small groups, arranged side by side or back to back. Body heat was treated as a resource, not a personal boundary. Wool coats and blankets were layered over multiple men, creating a shared thermal mass that, retained heat far longer than individual coverings. This practice was especially common during static trench warfare, where movement was, quite limited. It reduced heat loss dramatically and conserved calories, which were in short supply. While modern culture resists this idea, the physics remains sound. In survival situations, shared insulation and proximity can significantly increase warmth without additional materials. Moisture management mattered more than thickness. Wool greatcoats, retained insulation even when damp, unlike those early cotton-filled bags that just collapsed when wet. Soldiers learned to vent wraps just a bit at the chest or neck, so that moisture from breath and sweat could escape. Drying layers during daylight, whenever possible, was considered essential maintenance. Even a brief airing, honestly, could restore insulating power. These days, many people tend to underestimate just how much moisture can build up inside their sleeping systems. Applying the logic from the First World War, it really means making breathable materials a priority, venting when it's needed, and regularly drying out your insulation to keep everything performing as it should. Back then, wind blocking was actually considered a form of insulation, rather than just another layer of shelter. Soldiers placed packs, boards, sandbags or trench walls strategically to block wind at body level. Wind strips heat by accelerating convection, especially near the ground. By creating low windbreaks, soldiers preserved warmth without adding layers. This approach remains effective today. A simple wind barrier, positioned correctly, can raise perceived warmth dramatically. The World War I method reminds us that insulation is not just what you wear, but how you shape the environment around you. This system succeeded because it addressed heat loss from every direction. Unlike sleeping bags that focus on wrapping the body, this World War I field hack treated warmth as a full system problem. Heat loss downward, upward, laterally, and through evaporation was addressed simultaneously. Ground insulation prevented conduction. Tight wraps reduced convection. Wool managed moisture. Windbreaks slowed airflow. Shared body heat increased thermal mass. Each element alone helped, but together they created a stable microclimate around the sleeper. That is why soldiers often reported better rest using these methods than with issued bedding. The lesson from the trenches remains relevant. The First World War forced millions of ordinary people to confront cold with limited resources. The solutions that emerged were not elegant, but they were effective. They worked because they followed physical reality rather than convenience. Modern gear has improved, but the fundamentals have not changed. If you are interested in cold weather survival, historical fieldcraft, or understanding how people endured extreme conditions with minimal technology, this method deserves serious attention. It is not nostalgia. If this guide added real value to your understanding of wartime survival and historical ingenuity, subscribe to In the Beginning, Share this episode with others who care about practical history and help keep these hard-earned lessons alive.